disclosure. Disclosure that gives policymakers the context they need to make choices and firms the ability to anticipate and respond to these choices. Now, let's be absolutely clear. We're not scientists at the Bank of England. We're not climate policymakers. There are a lot of uncertainties around these issues. And given those uncertainties, not everyone will agree on the path. Some will dispute those calculations of carbon budgets. Others might despair that there will ever be financial consequences of burning fossil fuels. Still others could decide that the stakes make political action inevitable. Point is, the right information will allow skeptics and evangelists alike to back their convictions with capital. It will reveal the valuations of companies that produce and use fossil fuels and how those valuations might change over time. It will expose the likely future cost of doing business, of paying for emissions, of changing processes to avoid these charges, and of tighter regulation. It will help smooth adjustment as opinions change, rather than concentrating them in a single Minsky moment. And crucially, it will allow feedback between the market and policymaking, making climate policy a bit more like monetary policy, where policymakers learn from markets' reactions and refine their stance. Now, the idea that better information can promote a more timely response is not new. Much the opposite. There's nearly 400 initiatives that attempt to provide such information. And in aggregate, over 90% of FTSE 100 firms and 80% of the global Fortune 500 participate in to some degree in some variant of them. Now, unfortunately, these existing schemes vary in their status, their scope, and their ambition. And the surfeit of initiatives and the fragmented disclosure that results creates a risk of getting lost in the right direction. So irrespective of field, whether it's in finance or science, the most effective disclosures are consistent, they're comparable, they're clear, reliable, and they're efficient. And meeting such standards requires coordination, which is what the G20 and the FSB are ideally placed to provide. The logical starting point is a coordinated assessment of what constitutes effective disclosure, an assessment made not by the public sector, but by the private sector, by those who understand both what's valuable and what's feasible. So an idea is to establish an industry-led climate disclosure task force to design and deliver a voluntary standard for disclosure by companies that produce or emit carbon. Companies would not only disclose what they're emitting today, but also how they plan their transitions to the net zero world of the future. And this proposal, again, it's a variant on an older idea, a recent idea, where the FSB successfully catalyzed improved disclosure by the world's largest banks, many of whom represented in this room, at my table, in fact, surprisingly, improved disclosure by the world's largest banks following the financial crisis. And that effort, the EDTF, showed that how the private sector, the buy side, the sell side, the rating agencies, and the issuers can radically improve disclosure, and they radically improve disclosure and build market discipline without the need for detailed or prescriptive or costly regulatory interventions. So such static disclosure is a necessary first step. And there's two ways that its impact could be amplified. I'll say a couple words on them and then conclude. The first way is that governments, potentially sparked by COP21, could complement that disclosure by giving guidance on possible carbon price paths. Such a carbon price corridor involves, just as it sounds, indicative minimum and maximum prices for carbon. So even if the initial indicative price is set far below the true cost of carbon, the price signal itself holds great value by linking climate exposures to a monetary value. And the second element that could enhance this disclosure is to use stress testing to profile the size of the skews from climate change to the returns of businesses. And this is another area where insurers, and Lloyd's in particular, is at the cutting edge. Your stress testing technology is well suited to analyzing the tail risks that are likely to grow fatter with time. Stress testing, built off better disclosure and with the carbon price corridor, could act as a time machine, shining light not just on today's risks, but on those that may otherwise lurk in the darkness for years to come. So let me conclude. Our societies face a series of profound social challenges, political challenges, economic challenges, and John detailed them. They also face environmental challenges which link back to each of those. The combination of the weight of scientific evidence and the dynamics of the financial system suggest that in the fullness of time, climate change will threaten financial resilience and longer-term prosperity. While there's still time to act, the window is finite and is closing. Others will need to learn from Lloyd's example in combining data, technology, and expert judgment to measure and manage these risks. The December meetings in Paris will work towards plans to curb carbon emissions and encourage the funding of new technologies, but we'll need markets to work alongside them in order to maximize their impact. With better information as the foundation, we can build that virtuous circle of better understanding of tomorrow's risks, better pricing for investors, better decision-making by policymakers, and a smoother transition to a low-carbon economy. By managing what gets measured, we can break this tragedy of the horizons. Thank you very much. Thank you, John.